welcome to our third Real Debate. I'm really delighted to welcome a gentleman that I've now known for, several years, I think it's true to say. And this gentleman also sits on the board of our company and owns many other companies, which I'll let him explain. Nick Kirby, CEO of Swanline Group, you are very welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, chaps.
And the other gentleman, who I'm guessing you're starting to get familiar with, is Chris McNeill, my business partner, my partner in crime. So welcome, everybody. Just to sort of frame the debate today, we're going to be talking about the corrugated industry specifically, and perhaps a bit of paper and new emerging technologies that are coming that are going to impact on the entire supply chain. And there's some such exciting stuff coming. So without further ado, Nick, I'm going to start with the first question, if that's all right. So what do you do? What do you love doing when you're not thinking about paper, corrugated, and print?
Well, I'm one of those that corrugated's in my blood, and you know, it's very difficult sometimes to relax when it's not actually on your mind. You know what it's like. You guys are the same, I'm sure. But yeah. I'm very, very lucky because recently my life's changed quite dramatically, in that I've got grandchildren now, and so I've gone from no grandchildren back in early 2019 to suddenly having two with another one on the way. So whilst it's difficult for obvious circumstances in lockdown, I do manage to get time, certainly with my daughter and my little granddaughter, as they're in our bubble. And I love that. And, you know, they love the outdoors as well. So we can walking, and walking my dog. I've got a beautiful border collie dog.
I know you adore your dog, don't you?
I adore my animals generally, but yeah, I have a lovely dog. So walking, and we're lucky. We're a very close family. And then if it's raining outside and can't do all that sort of stuff, then cooking. I enjoy a bit of cooking as well. And cook a mean curry and
into
that sort of
cooking. Do you bake bread out of interest?
I've not baked bread, no. But I tend to like sort of Asian food and cooking it, or just even making things up. But I just find it really relaxing, and of course, it's always an excuse to have a glass of beer or a wine, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, food brings people together, doesn't it?
It does.
As Chris will tell you, I've been boring him recently with all my pictures of my bread loaves. I've become obsessed with bread making. I love it. It's sort of a ritual now, almost every day. So
it's that smell, isn't it? The smell of it baking.
It is. Yeah. It is amazing. Oh,
yeah.
That's great.
I'm only in it for the eating.
So I should explain for those that don't know you. You are the owner, founder of a number of businesses. Do you want to just do a quick elevator? Yeah. No, not elevator pitch, but a quick overview of what you do.
Yeah. So as I say, the family history, very, very briefly, goes all the way back to the mid 1800s. So it's sort of in our family blood. But the company that has driven the businesses that are involved with it at the moment is a company called Swanline, or Swanline Print, as it started. And we now have a small group which comes under that sort of informal umbrella of Swanline Group. But they're all very much linked to each other in some shape or form. So everything from very specialist sort of services in the very high end graphics, packaging, and point of sale sectors, through to sustainable materials, sustainable energy generation, material manufacture. So that it's a very wide, broad spectrum, but nevertheless they're intrinsically linked and they support each other.
And how many sites now? How many sites in the group, and where are they?
Well, Swanline Group itself works out of 5 sites actually in Stone, and so that's Swanline Print Limited and Swanline Paper and Board. We have a site in Lichfield, which is a distribution business, very, very focused on e-commerce and gift packaging, called Boxmart. We have an interest in 2 businesses in Scunthorpe. One is a corrugated board manufacturer called Coreboard UK, And adjacent to that is a renewable energy facility, which I'm sure we'll talk at some point in this discussion. Sure. And that's based next door to the corrugated facility in Scunthorpe. So broadly, that's where we're based. We're pretty, we're pretty widespread and service the whole of the UK, really.
One of the first stories you told me when we met up again, what, 2 years ago or so, was the lovely story about Smurfit, Jefferson Smurfit. I'd love you to tell that story again, because I love that story. If you mind.
Yes, I mean, this is a story that my father shared with me many years ago. Was that when Smurfit started, and in fact, I'll tell it in the way he told me. There was he said a gentleman, I think born in Liverpool, who basically emigrated to Dublin and bought a tailor's shop. And please excuse me if all the facts are not 100% straight, but nevertheless, it's a true story. Emigrated to Dublin, bought a tailor's shop, and actually realised that he could make more money selling hat boxes than he could tailored suits. But he hadn't got the money to invest in machinery and that sort of thing. And he basically came across a machine dealer and got speaking to him about, well, I want to make boxes, but I can't afford the equipment. And this machine dealer said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you the machines for you to start your business. And then when you build it up a little bit and you can afford to, perhaps you can pay us for the equipment then. Well, the gentleman, Liverpool, who emigrated to Dublin, was Jefferson Smurfit, and the gentleman who loaned him the equipment to start his business was my grandfather. So, I'm very proud of that story, and what a business Smurfit Kappa is today. Family roots, amazing business, very strong, but it's nice to have that sort of story behind it.
Just to add to that, Chris and I were, before COVID, we were going around a factory not far from here, actually, in Whittam. And halfway around the factory, we spotted a Kirby die cutting machine, a roller press, and that tickled me. Yes. I don't know how old that machine is, but it's still going strong to this day.
Absolutely, they were built like battleships, and we have a Kirby machine in our factory as well. So, and it has sentimental value, because I think my father sold that machine into the trade at some point. So yeah, it's a lot of history behind it.
Out of interest, what would have been the value back then, and what's it worth to you now?
Well,
would you sell it?
No. but
about £1 million, Nick? About £1 million quid. Yeah?
Well, I mean, it's got sentimental value, but the reality is that these bits of equipment are still regularly used in businesses, whether they're just sort of regular, sort of traditional slitter scorers, bar benders, corner cutters. But I have an original brochure with prices on, and they were just literally a couple of £1,000 way back in the 1950s, 60s.
Can you share that, and we'll pop it up on the WhatsApp?
I can certainly send you some details. Yes, absolutely.
That would be great. That would be great. Well, thanks for that.
So you've bandied the S word about quite a lot recently, including just now. So I suppose really, but my first question would be, in terms of sustainability, obviously that S word. What projects are you most proud of in the world of sustainability?
Well, I guess the driver of all these is Swanline itself. So to actually generate something that has true sustainability, you've got to have that instigator, that business that instigates it, and that is well and truly Swanline, and continues to be. But nevertheless, what we've managed to achieve over the last few years in bringing together our business model has been the big investments at Corwood UK and the Corwood bioenergy plant. So two the collaborative businesses with other partners, obviously instrumental in getting those off the ground. But what it's created really is a huge sustainability advantage. I'm very, very proud of them, because they're big projects. They're not small projects. They are huge. And of course, with those sort of projects come a lot of trauma and settling time. You know, that it's been very, very difficult, but nevertheless settling now. And, you know, we've got some strong partners involved with the business, and, you know, the resolve to push those forward now and get them to the point of what we sort of dreamed of achieving is becoming closer and closer now to a sustainable, in terms of financially viable solution.
Anybody watching this that's buying corrugated and corrugated packaging and point of sale will be painfully aware of the supply issues at the moment in the marketplace. Can you sort of give an overview of why that is the case?
Yeah, I mean, we've never been through a pandemic before, and we've, in my view, I think we've just got a perfect storm, haven't we? We've had COVID, Brexit. We had the Christmas period, which is traditionally the most, you know, the busiest period of the year, and you know, bringing all these things together, really, that they have been the perfect storm, because it's quite a finite supply-demand position, and investments to cover off demand on paper, for instance, they're not things that you can turn on overnight. They take years of planning, and therefore we're playing catch up now in the you know, the changes to the market. So I would say that all those things coming together at once have created this shortage in the sector for paper-based materials.
And people buying online, I guess, you know, Amazon,
e-commerce
demand.
is yeah, I mean, e-commerce, thankfully, we predicted the huge rise in e-commerce packaging several years ago and invested for it. But 2020 has been extraordinary, and you know, our own growth on the packaging side, I think had the numbers the other day, was something like just under 30% growth on e-com. So very significant. But again, you take the big suppliers into the consumers these days on the e-com side, such as Amazon. The volume of materials that they consume to deliver packages to your door is immense. And yes, of course, there's the debates about how much material is used to deliver a biro to your, you know, to your door.
Yeah,
yes, that's another debate. But nevertheless, I think Amazon consumes something like 400 million square meters of material just in the UK. Well, that's 2 full corrugators. Supply, and their growth rate is enormous. So, you know, to keep up with those sort of changes in dynamics of the industry is very difficult. There are investments coming through. I mean, certainly I'm most aware of the ones in Europe, but there are investments that are coming through which will support this growth, but we're constantly playing catch up, and that's a problem.
Interesting. When do you think it's going to return back to normal for people buying their out of boxes, etc.?
Chris, I wish I had a crystal ball. I mean, my own thoughts, I think, are we're not going to see much change between now and early summer. And there's a few reasons for that. Is during 2020, you know, everyone was predicting the doom and gloom of coronavirus, but in fact, you know, I almost feel bad in saying it, but the packaging sector has actually done reasonably well out of the circumstances because of the change in dynamics and consumer habits. And that's meant really that the pressure on paper mills became immense, and they themselves were predicting this doom, and so they were finding other sales markets to sell paper into, like international markets, rather than just staying in Europe. So they would take contracts to sell paper elsewhere to cover off what they had predicted to be a pretty grim situation. And in fact, the opposite happened. So they had contracts for more than they could sell themselves. The massive increase in, we're talking about UK markets here, but it's the same across Europe. The increase in e-commerce also drove that. But as a result of that, the traditional downtime that you would take, say, over the Christmas period for maintenance wasn't taken, or certainly wasn't taken in some of the plants, and they use that time instead to try and get their heads above water and put more into stock. And of course, these machines are 24/7 machines. So they have to rest, they have to be maintained, and they've not been maintained to the level that they should have been. And that's going to play catch up. Well, they're going to have to be maintained, which means downtime too. So we have shortages, we have new mills due online that are delayed, we have the demand of e-commerce, and we have the need for maintenance now, which is going to take some capacity out, all giving us bigger and bigger issues. So I don't see this changing until early summer. I think we're going to see disruption for some time yet.
And I guess price increases because of the increasing demand.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, and you know, the price increases that we've seen in January, you know, I've not seen a price increase that's been that's had such well, it's got a strange aura about it in terms of, you know, the lead times for materials is more extended than the notice that you can actually give for increases. So, you know, people who've got orders on are actually being affected by price increases before it's even delivered.
Wow.
You know, and it's unusual. Yeah, and
unprecedented.
It's unprecedented, and you know, there are more paper increases coming through, we understand, for February. So those are going to filter through too. It's you know, it's going to be a tough few months.
Let's switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to go out of order of the plan, so forgive me for this. Just sort of focusing on the energy, the food waste powered plant at Scunthorpe and the corrugated facility Coolboard on the same site. Have you got any great examples that you could perhaps share that where this has really come into play?
I guess the best example is one that you guys have been involved with anyway, which is the Three Oceans. And that information is in the public domain. We've got few others.
A fish manufacturer in Hull.
A fish manufacturer in Hull, and basically the process waste is segregated and comes into Coolboard bioenergy, and it's a very good waste because it has high gas yield. So the waste comes in, and I think we're sort of running at about 10 tonne a week of process waste coming in, and that sort of batter type material, you know, cuttings and all that sort of stuff. It's not blood and guts and all that horrible stuff. It's the physical manufacture of the food product. So so that comes into the plant, and that is then generating energy for the manufacture of the material that their outer boxes are made from. And the outer boxes are made by a local company that's their choice of supplier, who buy their board from Coolboard to get sustainability benefits.
Just buy the sheets, and they then convert it, print it, and convert it. Yeah,
absolutely. So that gives a proper circular economy. So, you know, their waste is generating the energy for the manufacture of their materials that go into the box.
And is there anybody else doing that?
No. To my knowledge, this is a world first. Nobody else is doing this. The process for the energy generation is called anaerobic digestion. It is widely used. You get a lot of these models on farms, but that's changing because the farm model uses energy crops. And you know, if you think about it logically, why would you grow crops to make energy? We should be growing crops to eat. Ours is a food waste plant, and that takes in process waste from food manufacturers, but it can also take in palletized waste of packaged food, and you know, all sorts of materials come into the plant, and it's a real eye opener to see what comes in. It is
like.
It's almost, oh dear, your heart sinks when you see what comes in particular the overpackaged food. And I'm talking about single-use plastic here. You know, we would get, say, palletized waste in a single-use plastic container of some sort, which might have 3 wrappings around it before you get to the products inside. And when it comes into our plant, for any, you know, there could be several reasons. It could be, there could be a manufacturing fault with the food manufacturer. It could be a barcode that's printed wrong, or it could be classed as contaminated if there's, say, immigrants found in the back of a lorry that's been, you know, on an import that's come in, is classed as contaminated and goes into AD. Sorry, anaerobic digestion. But the problem is you depack all this stuff and somehow you have to get rid of that packaging. And of course, a lot of it's contaminated. So it can't really go for recycling. It has to be either incinerated or go to landfill. It's just unbelievable what we get. And, you know, we have an automatic depacker. So it gets smashed to bits and it extracts all the non-organic material. So you're left with the organic material, and then that goes into the anaerobic digestion process to generate the energy. But
so how much energy is generated?
So the plant capacity at the moment is 800 kilowatts an hour, which is about 6.4 gigawatts of power per annum. I mean,
Wow.
It's significant. It's more than double the energy requirements of the factory next door. So the rest of the energy goes into the national grid. The heat goes into the factory next door. They use the heat as well as the electricity.
Can you quantify? Can you quantify the energy in terms of something that people will understand, like numbers of houses it could heat, for example?
Yes. So the numbers of houses that will heat is around 1,600 houses or thereabouts, or you know, a size of a village, pretty much. So it's significant. But you know, the really clever thing about it, I think, personally, is based in Lincolnshire. It's the biggest growing area in the UK. The waste product of processing the food is basically fertilizer, high-grade fertilizer, and it is basically pasteurized, so it's had all the nasty bugs taken out of it by this point. And then that is sold to local farmers, and it's spread on fields, which is growing crops for the next lot of food. So it's a very powerful model, complex business, difficult in many ways. But you know, the circular economy and being able to talk to food processors, either directly or indirectly, is such a powerful thing, because they're under pressure to improve their own sustainability, and this is a big win.
Perfect. Yeah. Essentially, it's CO2, almost CO2 neutral supply of corrugated.
Yes, it is. So the manufacture of the material from cardboard is CO2 neutral in its manufacture, you know, as I said, I'm not aware of any other plant in the world doing this for the manufacture of materials themselves. It is used in paper making, where they use the effluent water in the anaerobic digestion process. That is commonly done, but this is food waste.
And when I came up to the factory last, you showed me the facility where all the clippings and corrugated offcuts go, and they then get sent to a factory up the road that turns them into pulp fruit punnets and other pulp molded packaging, which is I thought was a rather nice flow through.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, relatively local is a plant that does make these pulp fittings, and they take some of our waste, and the rest of it goes to a recycled paper mill in Manchester to make more paper. So again, there is no waste from the manufacture of the corrugated materials. Every bit of waste is reused.
That's amazing.
It's interesting because in the great debate about moving away from plastic and moving to a fiber-based material, people always say, but plastic is far better for carbon footprint than board. But that's now not the case. It's not the board; it's how it's manufactured.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really is. That's a very dangerous perception for people to have, because it's not until you experience the sort of waste that we see coming into the waste plant in Scunthorpe that you realise how big the problem is. it's enormous. You know, and for us to be processing this stuff and stripping waste out of it, and then having this plastic go to landfill, because it can't be, it can't be recycled. It's too contaminated. It can't go for incineration sometimes, depending on what it is. It's almost criminal. But having said that, it is. It's the way of the world, isn't it? That's how we are today. But I guess
Sadly,
this is where the focus has to be, and people have to be part of it.
We're going to switch gears a little bit and go into sort of new tech and what's going on at the sort of cutting edge of development in print and specifically large format corrugated manufacturing. We hear a lot about digital in the smaller format industry for labels and cartons, and which is relatively straightforward now to technologically do. But when we're talking about a very large format, what's going on that you can share with us?
Quite a few developments, really. I mean, if you look at the point of sale side, for a start, the digital process for printing point of sale units has been around for some time. Early 2000 or so, but it's quite painfully slow, and it was notoriously unreliable in terms of maintenance. You spent more time down than up, it suited some applications, but it was never, at that stage, it was never going to be something that you were going to see in packaging. That has changed quite dramatically over the last few years, and you still have these different sorts of technologies that you can choose from in your digital choice. And if I leave labels and cartons aside, because that's not my domain, that smaller format is not where we are. If I look at the larger format sizes, the point of sale side now, you have these very, very high quality digital printers. They tend in the main to be what we call multi-pass. So they go under the material goes under the head several times to build an image, but it's close on offset quality. It's excellent. And these machines quite happily churn out 1,000 square meters an hour. Whereas in the old, back in early 2000, it was about 50, so it's significant change. And higher quality. And of course, you get all the, we've all seen these presentations in the packaging and point of sale sectors about versioning and all this sort of stuff. Maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. But the process has just got to a point now where it's more economically viable to use, and it gives more flexibility.
Variable data. What do we mean by that? Being able to print every impression differently and queue the jobs, which of course you can't do with conventional printing, because you need to have printing plates. With digital, every time it goes under the print head, you can be loading a new image, new branding. What does that mean to a marketeer, a brand manager who's trying to launch a new chocolate brand or a new movie or something?
So we can segregate this into two sectors, really. So point of sale, which we've touched on, but you don't tend to see that much versioning in point of sale. You might get a couple of different products in the same unit, and you might have print, say, 250 and have 3 prints. That's not really versioning in terms of every single item being different. The packaging side is where we have the potential to service that side. And I say it with a smile on my face, because there are so many problems in doing it. It sounds wonderful. And, us as consumers, we want to absorb as much information as we can. And the technology that enables us to do that, of course, is digital, because we want to know where it's come from. We want to know what's in it and all these sort of things, but we also want to buy locally if we can. So different versioning by locality, by, product that's in the pack with a common pack. All these things we want to know as consumers what they are. You can also, of course, you can have variable data, and you can, in theory, I mean, I have been aware of one run of 10,000 cases for a packaging item. Each one had a different print, only through variable data, but it's possible to do. But it brings its own problem.
Clever software, it can mix up the colors and
but the technology gets let down further downstream because, you know, if you have a technical issue on the printer, for instance, and you miss a print, how do you find it? You know, I have very strong views on this, which occasionally might be controversial to other people's views, but nevertheless, you know, it's the downstream processes that sometimes are the failure of our ability to produce variable data.
Deliver digital. I mean, we've seen it with Vista print as an example, to pluck one example, you know, desktop publishing kind of delivery, but on a sort of Amazon scale, you know, where you can design your own card or piece of stationery and click, and 2 days later it lands on your doorstep.
Yeah.
Do you think we'll see that happening in the corrugated display packaging world anytime soon?
Yeah, yes, I do. You can already, you know, packaging, you can already buy version packaging online. And there are various companies specifically set up to do that, you know, that will give a reasonable result. However, there's lots of caveats that they attach to whatever you order online. Because if you're uploading your artwork, which way up is it? You know, is the color you see on the screen exactly what you're looking for, and all these sort of things. And you know, there are a lot of opportunities for the consumer or the individual who's ordering online not to be fully aware of what they're ordering and receive it and think, well, that's not what
it's upside down or something by the time it's gone from flat to three-dimensional.
Yeah, there's technical issues with it, but there's some very clever software available that limit this significantly. But I would say the biggest issue for packaging really is on the downstream processes. If you look at fulfillment being one, how on earth do you segregate these individual items, pack them, you know, pack these lots of different prints in the correct boxes and distribute them to the correct areas? It's highly, highly complex.
Well,
you know,
it is, but you know, look at what the motor industry is now doing. You know, if you take the Tesla vehicle, 75% of that vehicle is built by robots. And you know, you imagine the number of parts coming to make a motor car. It's extraordinary, and they're using QR codes, barcodes, whatever, to manage the data and the behavior of the robots.
Well, a lot of the failures tend to be human intervention or you know, analog technologies.
We're analog, aren't we?
and again, you know, maybe it is slightly controversial, but I'll give my view. Is there are some big digital print companies, very well-respected companies, producing machines to print large format web digital print, with a view of putting these huge rolls of print onto a corrugator. And I use the analogy myself that you know, it's like putting a Ferrari engine in a Model T Ford. You know, it's not going to work. You know, they're not compatible. And if you look at corrugating technology, and I look at the machine in Scunthorpe, and it is just an amazing piece of equipment. But at the end of the day, under that beautiful exterior, and it's a lovely looking machine, under that beautiful exterior, it's a mangle. It's heat, steam, pressure, waste, and you introduce this to a very precise digital print process, and you've got the trouble that goes with it. You know, you have to, across your decal or width of the reel, you have to plan everything up. And if we're talking about versioning here, if you have a corrugator breakdown or the web breaks, you have the waste. How do you track that and replace it because it's digital? You know, there are huge complexities in introducing it. So for me, I would look at offline, but that in itself has its own problems. And what do you choose in terms of inks?
Wow.
As a trade manufacturer and supplying, you know, corrugated manufacturers within Europe, What does that mean to anybody that doesn't understand trade manufacturing?
So basically, it means giving people the opportunity to service sectors that otherwise they possibly don't have the internal resource to access. So, you know, I guess we invest in technology on behalf of our clients so that they have access to value-added markets. But we don't, you know, this is not a sort of copy what everyone else does type model. This is we like to constantly innovate. So we try to we spend an awful lot on R&D. We have a huge design department, and we try to create solutions for problems people didn't even know existed. Really, we come up with a solution, and then we will go out and try to solve that solution.
You've done some for us.
Yes,
I just have one here.
Oh, there you go. Look. There you go. Yeah.
So this is, I think this is a Lindsay, one of the most talented structural designers. Basically, this is an ice bucket. It could be a punnet, but basically that pops up. I haven't done that terribly well. Anyway, from flat, it pops up. Very clever little design.
Yeah, and you know, innovation goes very well with sustainability anyway. It's all very well being sustainable. Well, what are you doing about driving forward? You know, you have to challenge convention. You know, doing it how we used to do it doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way. We should be challenging all these things, and I think Swanline's good at that. You know, we do come up with great ideas. We've actually won quite a lot of awards for that, you know, I think we just facilitate easy access to markets that others struggle to, you know, get into without huge investment.
Go on, Chris. Ask him a difficult question. I know you're dying to.
No,
throw in the bomb. Go on.
On a controversial level, which everyone knows I'm not usually very controversial. You probably recently saw our discussion on inks, which is a very big part of what we all do. We all care very carefully about the food, the direct food side, but we don't often really think much about what goes on the other side of the board. What's your opinion on in the world of inks as a printer yourself?
Again, very strong opinions on this. One of the technologies that we're looking to invest in is single pass digital technology. So that's where the substrate goes under the head of the printer one time and it's finished. Amazing technology out there at the moment. However, there are two basic ink sets here. There is a UV ink set and there is a water-based ink set. Both of them have their own individual issues. If we're looking at true sustainability, we should be looking at water-based inks because it doesn't matter how you dress up UV. You know, you have a lot of UV companies or UV ink manufacturers saying that they're this approved, that approved, blah, blah, and Nestle take it and approve it and all this sort of stuff. Well, the bottom line is it's carcinogenic. You can't get away from that factor. But when it passes under a UV lamp, which is the drying process, it changes its molecular structure and becomes a solid. But it's still carcinogenic. You know, you can't get away from that. Water-based inks are not. They're very, very good. However, they bring their own issues, and those issues are that the machines are considerably more expensive because you have to prevent the ink from drying in, say, the print heads is just one issue. And another issue is you have to, when you dry it, which has to be through heat, you have to remove the water from the ink. And that takes an awful lot of energy to be able to do that. So you have this trade-off. You have very expensive equipment that needs a lot of maintenance on water-based inks, but it also burns an awful lot of energy, which is not ideally, you know, the situation you want to be when you're talking about sustainability, against UV, which uses, again, great technology, but it's simpler because UV only dries when it's in contact with light. So you don't get the, you know, you don't get the ink drying in on the heads and that sort of stuff. The maintenance is easier. The platforms themselves are less expensive to buy. But my focus is water-based. It has to be water-based. For me, I do not want to be investing in technology that's UV that doesn't fit our model moving forward of true sustainability, and more in, we want to service more in the food sector. And as sure as night follows day, when people turn to something else to focus on in terms of sustainability, inks could come under, the cosh there.
Yeah,
we certainly, Chris, we've noticed more and more questions, haven't we, around inks, coatings, and glues.
I'm definitely trying to help people ask the questions about inks, coatings, and glues, because it's something that brands are. When we talk to brands about changing a substrate, we get grilled within an inch of our lives on the ingredients of the substrate, the coating, the glue. No one ever talks about the ink.
Yeah,
and the tertiary packaging. So, the tape that goes onto the outside of the box, and the shrink wrap that goes around the pallet to pass it through the supply chain.
Yeah.
The number of times where we've gone to huge amounts of effort to develop a plastic-free product, and then only to find out that it's been delivered wrapped in plastic because it's gone to a third-party haulier or something's happened, and you've lost control of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very, very frustrating. Well, look, that's absolutely fantastic. I've just got one last question that I wanted to ask you, and I haven't given you any heads up on this, so it'd be interesting to see how you react. I know you read a lot. First of all, what are you reading at the moment, and what's the most what book has had the most influence on you in your life?
Oh my word. Okay. So I've just started reading actually a book by Noel Fitzpatrick, the super vet on TV. Early days, but I've just picked that book up and started reading that. And my choice of book tends to be factual. I really struggle with the fictional stuff. I
you don't do Mills and Boon, is that what you're saying?
I've got a whole collection. I can see a few on your shelf there, actually.
Send us some down. Most of these books, by the way, these are cookbooks, most of them. Well, the top half, and then the bottom half is weird. You just don't ask.
Yeah. So yeah, that tends to be my focus. I mean, I also do a lot of I love history, and I do a lot of reading on the internet. Quite frankly, I'll Google a specific subject and read it on the internet. But factual things I like. I struggle with fictional stuff. Another book I read recently was Eddie Jones, the England rugby squad coach. Fantastic book. Again, biographies, something that I enjoy reading. So
I do too.
Yeah.
I really have. Chris, what are you reading at the moment? Anything that you can tell us about? Or is it all
no, nothing at the moment?
Top shelf, or is it bottom shelf?
I'm still Netflix box set binging, I'm afraid.
He's a millennial, Nick, isn't he? It's all YouTube. It's got to be flashing, moving images. I'm reading two books. In fact, I've just finished one. I haven't got it here, I don't think. One's called The Third Plate, which is all about food and where it comes from. Absolutely fascinating, written by an American guy, chef, author, speaker called Dan Barber, and I have to say that book is incredible. I recommend it to everybody I meet. And the one I'm just started reading, which is looking like it's going to be really good, is first book that this guy's produced. His name is David Newman. Chris and I actually know him, not that well, but we know him through Sian Sutherland at A Plastic Planet. And he's written a book called Everything is Connected. It's just been published, and it's a blow your socks off job.
Interesting.
He does it. His background is biopolymers and packaging, not packaging, but he used to be part of Greenpeace. He's an activist, this guy, but actually he comes at it from a perspective of money and power and why things don't get done. It's absolutely fascinating. Should be on the school syllabus. Yeah.
Interesting.
Nick, that's been fantastic. Thank you. We've gone over a little bit. We always do this, but I think we were about 40 minutes. But thank you very much.
Doesn't matter when you're talking about
stuff you love.
what you're passionate about, does it? It really
doesn't. Absolutely.
But no, thanks for giving up your time and sharing your experience and wisdom. It's fantastic. Chris and I learned so much from you. You're an inspiration.
Well, and likewise, if I'm honest, I mean, I've learned so much from you guys. And the one thing I would say about this industry is
what not to do, those sort of things.
No, what to do. I mean, you know, you're constantly learning, don't you? I mean, I'm 42 years in this industry. Not that I count. But
3 days, 7 hours of walk.
Does that make you about 80? Does it? You look good on 80.
But you know, you constantly learn, and I'm constantly learning, and you know, we are seeing new technologies and innovations coming through, and they're all part of the learning process. This is a fascinating industry that we're in, and anything paper-based, I find fascinating, quite frankly. And let's face it. It is the future, and there are so many options available now in paper-based materials against single-use plastics. And again, I know I'm being slightly controversial, but I think a lot of people really have to look hard and close at their packaging, and can they really honestly say that their claims about sustainability are true? You know, when you actually realize just what happens to some of this waste when you see it, as I have. You actually see what happens to this stuff. You know,
the thing that gets me so frustrated is when people talk about circular economy. They're usually talking about one tiny little loop over here. Yeah, but that's not the circular economy. The circular economy is it's life.
You're right. You're right. And
it's
again,
a biosphere.
It is. And again, just to finish off, really, I mean, if we're talking about a true circular economy, it's about collaboration. This is not about any one business saying, yeah, I've got a circular economy. You have to collaborate. And if you look at the circular economy that we have created, there are 5 loops in that circular economy of different companies, some not within our group, that make it work, but they work together to do that. You can't go out there with true sustainability and a circular economy without collaborating, and sharing that knowledge is where the power comes from.
Absolutely.
Nice. Well, Chris, I mean, you've been in the packaging world now, what, 18 months, 2 years, something like that? Got dragged in from
that. Blimey, it's been about
dragged in from the world of food.
Now.
So, and you've become an absolute packaging geek. You're actually more knowledgeable than I am now, which is slightly embarrassing to admit, but I think you are. So, you know, looking from the outside, looking in, what's your view of things, Chris?
Highly controversial, so I only ever say half of what I actually think. But my main point is I get deeply frustrated at the tit for tat arguments of my material's better than your material. Is it plastic versus board? They all have their own issues, but if we're not all willing to accept a few issues and move in the right direction and stop believing the salesman, we regularly come up against MVTR requirements, which a product doesn't actually need. They're just used to having the
moisture vapor transfer for anybody that didn't know what that was.
Sorry, nerd overload. Often a company will say, we need a moisture vapor transfer rate of X, but that's just what the film that they currently buy has. But when you're selling one plastic film against another plastic film, what are your USPs? It's going to be price, or, you know, my plastic's a bit better than that one, and it's a bit more, you know, so you're constantly driving the bar up, but you don't need it for the product that's actually in it at all.
I've got to tell a story, and then we'll end it. But one of the funniest moments was at a industry packaging awards night dinner in Brighton, the FPA. I'm going to just say it, the Food Packaging Service Association. And somebody, I won't say who it is because it wouldn't be kind. Somebody basically told Chris to go away from one table and go and sit back on his table because because you were asking the editor, you were chatting to the editor of
what it was. I was due to be on a panel with the editor of the Packaging News, and we were talking about biopolymers because that was the subject of what the panel was going to be about at it was the IFE show or something similar. But a member of the table that he was on was also from the plastics industry and had no understanding of so there was a future about to happen. So our discussion to the editor was not welcome because it's like they didn't really want him to know what the options were going forward. So it was,
they had the old closed mind syndrome.
So it was more embarrassing for them than it was for me. Let's put it that way.
You became a hero.
No
you became a hero. Well, look,
we gave a few clients.
Thank you. Thanks for your time, and see you on the other side.
See you on the other side. Take care, guys.
Have a great
Stay
weekend.
online for a second,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Actually.